Tonight, we journey into the shadows, unraveling stories of terrifying encounters with entities from realms beyond. If you think you're brave enough, join us as we delve into accounts that defy logic and chill the soul. But beware! Each tale serves as a haunting reminder that some doors should remain closed. Title: The Architect of Shadows. Dr. Nathaniel Ward arrived in Chicago on a gray afternoon, the chill of early autumn clinging to the air. His boots clacked rhythmically against the damp cobblestone streets, echoing through the narrow alleys as he made his way to the heart of the city. Clad in a tailored dark coat and hat pulled low over his brow, he was a figure that demanded both admiration and suspicion. To those who crossed paths with him, he was simply a young doctor, serious and perhaps a little too quiet. But the more astute would have noticed his eyes, cold, calculating, always scanning his surroundings with an unsettling calm. Nathaniel's reputation as a doctor preceded him. Letters of recommendation and references, some forged, others carefully curated from his past exploits, painted a picture of a dedicated medical professional. The truth, however, was far darker. Nathaniel Ward wasn't in Chicago to heal. He was here to hunt, though his prey wasn't found in the forests or fields, but in the drawing rooms of the wealthy and the quiet desperation of the vulnerable. He took up residence in a modest boarding house run by a widow, Mrs. Harper, whose rent was fair but whose prying questions grew irritating. It didn't take long for Nathaniel to understand her weakness, a combination of loneliness and a recent inheritance that she often boasted about to her boarders. She had lost her husband the previous year, and though she presented herself as a woman of strength, her vulnerability lingered just below the surface. Nathaniel began his scheme with subtlety, inviting her to discuss her late husband's estate under the guise of professional concern. It was with a gentle touch and well-placed empathy that he convinced Mrs. Harper to invest a portion of her inheritance in a fictitious medical venture. He promised her substantial returns, all while masking his true intentions beneath a veneer of sincerity. His demeanor was flawless, never too eager, always softly reassuring. And Mrs. Harper, seeing only a compassionate young doctor, handed over her savings without a second thought. After securing his first substantial sum in Chicago, Nathaniel moved on, leaving Mrs. Harper with nothing but hollow promises and fabricated letters from investors. The thrill of this first con fueled his ambition, and he realized how easily people could be molded to his will. Within a month, Dr. Ward had set up an office on South Street, a busy thoroughfare that connected Chicago's wealthier districts to the bustling markets and train stations. The location was perfect for his purposes. His office was modest yet respectable, with a brass plaque reading Dr. Nathaniel Ward, M.D. outside the door. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic, and medical charts lined the walls, giving it an aura of credibility. He advertised his services as a private physician with advanced treatments for ailments that most doctors had dismissed as incurable. Wealthy patients, desperate for hope, began trickling in. Each was met with the same careful performance. Nathaniel's calm, unwavering gaze, his soft-spoken voice, and his precise medical terminology that baffled more than enlightened. For an extra fee, he offered experimental treatments that sounded promising yet lacked any grounding in science. These treatments were nothing more than saline injections or sugar pills, but the patients were willing to pay exorbitant fees in the hope of a cure. One such patient, Mr. Jacob Barnes, was a man of considerable means but diminishing health. Diagnosed with a rare blood disorder, Barnes had seen nearly every specialist in the city, each giving him the same bleak prognosis. When he stumbled upon Dr. Ward's practice, he was skeptical but intrigued. Nathaniel could sense the man's desperation, and he played on it ruthlessly. He offered Barnes an expensive series of injections, claiming they contained rare compounds sourced from the East. The treatment, of course, was a sham, but Barnes clung to the faint improvement he imagined feeling. Week after week, he returned, each time parting with more money. Nathaniel's calm demeanor hid his growing amusement at how easily he could manipulate a man's hope into profit. And when Barnes finally caught on to the deception, it was too late. His wealth was depleted, and his health worsened. In the end, he was too humiliated to pursue legal action. Dr. Ward's reputation as a respectable physician continued to grow, though whispers circulated among the wary. He had a magnetic quality, especially with women, who were drawn to his poised manners and genteel appearance. It was no surprise when he began courting the young heiress, Miss Lillian Monroe. Lillian was the daughter of a prominent businessman, sheltered and naive. Ward played the role of a doting suitor to perfection, showering her with attention, listening to her dreams of marriage and family. But his interest was far from genuine. Through Lillian, he saw an opportunity not only to elevate his social standing, but to access her father's considerable fortune. The courtship proceeded quickly, with Nathaniel proposing marriage within 3 months. Lillian's father, sensing something amiss, demanded a prenuptial agreement. Nathaniel feigned offense, even going so far as to sever the engagement temporarily. The move worked brilliantly. Lillian, horrified at the thought of losing him, persuaded her father to relent. The engagement resumed, and Nathaniel moved forward with his plan. Following their wedding, Lillian began noticing odd behavior in her new husband. He would disappear for hours, offering vague explanations that never quite made sense. He grew increasingly cold, and when she questioned him, he dismissed her concerns with a calculating smile that sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't long before Nathaniel began using her family's connections for his own gain, engaging in dubious investments under her name. When Lillian attempted to confront him, he used psychological manipulation, twisting her words and making her doubt her sanity. The emotional toll left her feeling isolated and defeated, and her family, seeing her distress, urged her to leave him. But Nathaniel had drained her accounts by then, leaving her financially dependent on him. Dr. Ward's schemes grew bolder as his confidence soared. He began entertaining wealthy out-of-towners who needed short-term lodging, setting up a few rooms above his office. These guests, often eager to explore the city and charmed by his hospitality, sometimes failed to return home, leaving behind only rumors and whispers. One such guest was Samuel Pike, a businessman from St. Louis. Pike was last seen entering Ward's office late one evening, supposedly for an urgent medical consultation. Witnesses later claimed they saw him leaving the premises looking disoriented, but no one could say for certain where he had gone. His family in St. Louis reported him missing, but with no evidence of foul play, the authorities had little to investigate. Ward maintained a calm facade as rumors began swirling, treating each inquiry with measured responses. He assured those who asked that Mr. Pike had departed after treatment and expressed concern for his well-being. His detachment only deepened the unease among those who heard of the missing man, yet none dared to question Dr. Ward outright. After his initial successes, Dr. Nathaniel Ward's ambitions grew bolder. He invested his accumulated wealth in a new property in the heart of Chicago, a structure he would refer to privately as the Castle. This multi-story building was ostensibly a boarding house, but its construction held a darker purpose. Ward commissioned labyrinthine corridors, rooms with hidden chutes, and chambers outfitted with soundproofing, each detail tailored to serve his hidden agenda. The castle quickly drew tenants, many of whom were strangers to Chicago and unaware of the rumors that had begun to circulate. Nathaniel oversaw every aspect of the construction, ensuring no one saw the full design of the place. Contractors worked in short shifts, instructed to avoid discussing the building's unique layout. By compartmentalizing the construction, Nathaniel maintained complete control over his vision. To potential renters, he was the image of a welcoming landlord, courteous and attentive, with an air of calm assurance that put them at ease. But behind closed doors, his intentions were anything but hospitable. Nathaniel had meticulously designed each floor with hidden passageways, a complex layout of traps and dead ends meant to confuse and isolate. His goal was simple: to trap victims in his web with little hope of escape. It wasn't long before the first disappearance at the castle raised suspicions. Amelia Green, a young woman who had come to Chicago for work, was last seen entering the castle on a Friday evening. A polite and soft-spoken tenant, Amelia had been pleased with her room and mentioned to friends that she finally felt at home in the bustling city. But that weekend, she was nowhere to be found, and her belongings remained untouched in her room. Nathaniel feigned concern when questioned by Amelia's family, who arrived days later in a frantic search for her. He offered his assistance and assured them he would help investigate. But, as always, his sincerity was a calculated mask. He kept a close watch on their movements, strategically obstructing their access to parts of the building and providing misleading information whenever he sensed their suspicions. As the days stretched into weeks, Amelia's family returned home in despair, and the case went cold. To the authorities, it seemed a tragic but ordinary case of a young woman vanishing in a large city. Nathaniel's careful manipulation had paid off, his castle concealing its first victim. Despite his outwardly impeccable reputation, the whispered rumors surrounding Dr. Ward and the castle began to spread among the people of Chicago. The local shopkeepers noted the high turnover of residents, many of whom seemed to disappear overnight, leaving no forwarding address. Yet, Nathaniel continued to maintain an appearance of propriety, greeting his neighbors with polite nods and contributing generously to local charities. Detective James Crawford, a seasoned officer with a keen eye, began to notice the pattern. A number of the missing individuals had last been seen at the castle, though none had left a trace of foul play. Intrigued, Crawford took an unofficial interest in the case, subtly asking questions around the neighborhood, gathering what little information he could. But Nathaniel's charm and strategic deflection ensured that every inquiry hit a dead end. One evening, a guest by the name of Walter Reynolds arrived at the castle. A journalist by trade, Reynolds had an instinct for uncovering secrets and had heard of the unusual disappearances linked to the boarding house. Though he claimed to be visiting on vacation, he had come to the castle with a hidden purpose: to investigate the whispered rumors surrounding Dr. Ward. Reynolds kept a low profile, observing Nathaniel's behavior and gathering details about the building's unusual layout. He quickly noticed the peculiarities: the doors that seemed to lock unexpectedly, the odd angles of the hallways, and the tenants who avoided eye contact when passing one another. He sensed a kind of unease that he couldn't quite explain, as if the building itself held secrets he was only beginning to uncover. Unbeknownst to him, Dr. Ward had already identified him as a threat. Nathaniel observed his movements closely, marking his attempts to explore restricted parts of the castle. With calm precision, he began orchestrating Reynolds' downfall, guiding him into a carefully set trap. As Reynolds continued his investigation, he found himself increasingly ensnared in the twisted layout of the castle. His attempts to find hidden rooms led him into endless corridors, each turn bringing him deeper into the maze. He began hearing sounds late at night, faint echoes, the scrape of metal against stone, whispers he couldn't quite locate. His instincts told him to leave, but his curiosity drove him to stay. One evening, while attempting to access a room he had seen Nathaniel enter earlier, he discovered a trapdoor concealed beneath a rug. Just as he lifted it, he heard footsteps approaching and quickly retreated to his room, heart pounding. That night, as he lay in bed, he realized the extent of the danger he was in. He was no longer investigating from the outside. He was caught within the heart of Nathaniel's web. By the following night, Reynolds was resolved to escape. He packed his belongings under cover of darkness, his hands shaking as he fumbled with his suitcase. But as he moved through the building's twisting corridors, he found each exit locked, the doors impenetrable. The castle was designed to prevent escape, a fortress that held him captive under Nathaniel's watchful eye. Just when he thought all hope was lost, he found a stairway leading to the basement, which he had yet to explore. Descending the steps, he felt a chill settle over him as he noticed marks on the walls, deep grooves scraped into the stone as if by fingernails. His steps grew slower, each creak of the wooden stairs amplifying his dread. At the bottom, he discovered a dark chamber, its walls lined with shelves cluttered with surgical instruments and empty bottles labeled with foreign names. It was a macabre sight, a testament to Nathaniel's cold-hearted exploitation of the vulnerable. Just as he turned to flee, he heard footsteps descending behind him. Reynolds barely managed to conceal himself as Dr. Ward entered the room. He watched from behind a stack of crates, holding his breath as Nathaniel inspected the instruments on the shelves. The doctor's expression was one of satisfaction, a chilling calm that suggested he knew exactly what Reynolds had found. He seemed almost to savor the moment, as if sensing the journalist's presence in the shadows. Realizing that his life hung by a thread, Reynolds waited until Nathaniel left before sprinting back up the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he had to escape, but each exit he encountered was locked tight. As he circled through the maze of corridors, he understood the depth of Nathaniel's deception. Detective Crawford, who had been discreetly investigating the disappearances, finally gathered enough suspicion to warrant an official search of the castle. Accompanied by officers, he arrived just as dawn broke over the city. They began methodically searching the building, but Nathaniel, aware of their presence, had prepared for this moment. As the police combed through the castle's corridors, Nathaniel maintained his composure, offering them his cooperation with a pleasant demeanor. He led them on a controlled tour, steering them away from the hidden rooms and passageways. Crawford, sensing something was amiss, continued his search, determined not to leave until he had evidence. Detective Crawford's suspicions grew as he pieced together the evidence he had gathered over months of careful investigation. The interviews with former tenants, the hauntingly empty rooms, and the eerie silence of the castle's hallways weighed heavily on his mind. Each clue was small in isolation, but when woven together, they painted a picture too sinister to ignore. Crawford realized he was dealing with a man who had hidden his crimes in plain sight, building a fortress to house his dark secrets. Determined to bring Ward to justice, Crawford pushed for an official search of the castle. His persistence paid off when the police granted a warrant, although Ward was notified and had time to prepare. Crawford knew that Ward's charm and connections might still provide a shield, but he was ready to face the manipulative doctor head-on. The following morning, Crawford and his team arrived at the castle. Nathaniel Ward greeted them with his usual composure, his face a mask of indifference. "Detective Crawford," he said with a slight smile. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Crawford wasted no time. "We're here to search the premises. I trust you'll cooperate fully, Dr. Ward." Ward inclined his head, as if unfazed. "Of course, Detective. I have nothing to hide. Please, proceed." As the officers began their search, Crawford sensed Ward's gaze lingering on him, calculating and sharp. They moved through the castle room by room, yet each chamber appeared as ordinary as the next. Crawford's frustration mounted. Ward had clearly prepared for this, emptying the rooms of incriminating items and cleverly concealing any evidence. But Crawford was persistent. He noticed a slight shift in one of the floorboards, a detail others might have missed. Intrigued, he pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small leather-bound book, a ledger with notes on Ward's tenants. His heart raced as he flipped through the pages, each entry a chilling reminder of those who had vanished. Realizing that the discovery of the ledger could seal his fate, Ward's calm facade finally cracked. With practiced precision, he slipped out of the castle, disappearing into the bustling Chicago streets. Crawford, aware of Ward's escape, organized a search team to pursue him. The manhunt began, and Chicago was swept into a frenzy as the authorities broadcast Ward's description across the city. Ward, desperate and disheveled, fled to the outskirts of town, seeking refuge among the unassuming buildings he had once used to store his ill-gotten wealth. He knew that his chances of escape were slim, but his survival instinct took over. As he ran, he thought of the hidden caches of money he had scattered throughout the city, his last lifeline if he managed to escape. Back at the castle, Crawford continued his search, uncovering hidden rooms that had been cleverly constructed to prevent any sound from escaping. The walls were lined with remnants of surgical tools, bottles labeled with foreign substances, and belongings that hinted at the lives of those who had disappeared. The air was thick with the horror of what had taken place within those walls. One by one, the officers cataloged the evidence, each item confirming the dark reality of Ward's atrocities. The media caught wind of the investigation, and soon, the entire city of Chicago was captivated by the story of the Twisted Castle and the man who had used it as his personal playground of terror. Public outrage grew as people learned the extent of Ward's deception and the countless lives he had destroyed. After days of relentless pursuit, Crawford received a tip-off that Ward had been spotted near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The area was cordoned off, and the detective led a team into the crumbling building. Inside, Ward was cornered, disheveled and defeated, but his eyes retained a glint of defiance. Realizing his time had come, Ward attempted one final escape, but Crawford anticipated the move, blocking his path and ordering the officers to close in. As they handcuffed Ward, the once composed doctor maintained his silent stare, as though unbothered by the consequence of his actions. Crawford felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he also sensed the weight of the victims Ward had left in his wake. The trial of Nathaniel Ward captivated the nation. Witnesses testified, detailing the horrors they had experienced or witnessed within the walls of the castle. Families of the victims filled the courtroom, their faces etched with grief and anger as they listened to the evidence presented against Ward. Crawford took the stand, recounting his investigation and the grim discoveries made within the castle. Throughout the trial, Ward remained stoic, showing no remorse. His defense attempted to paint him as a misunderstood businessman, a victim of rumors and sensationalism, but the evidence was overwhelming. As the prosecution detailed each charge, from murder to fraud and beyond, the gravity of Ward's crimes became undeniable. In the end, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and the judge sentenced him to death. The courtroom erupted in quiet relief, though Crawford knew that no sentence could truly compensate for the suffering Ward had caused. On a cold morning, Nathaniel Ward was led to the gallows. Despite the weight of his sentence, he maintained his composure, his face a mask of indifference. In his final moments, he requested that his coffin be encased in concrete to prevent his body from being disturbed after death. Crawford, observing from a distance, felt a chill as he realized the depth of Ward's fixation with control, even in death. As the noose was tightened around his neck, Ward's expression remained calm. The lever was pulled and he dropped, but instead of a swift end, his neck failed to break, and he dangled, struggling as the crowd looked on. It was a haunting end to a man who had taken so many lives without remorse. After minutes of silent struggle, Ward's body finally stilled. With Ward's death, the city of Chicago attempted to heal. The castle was closed and eventually demolished, its walls hiding their secrets forever. Crawford, though praised for his role in capturing Ward, found little solace in the victory. The case had left a permanent scar, a reminder of the depths of human cruelty. Ward's legacy, built on deception and murder, would haunt him and the city for years to come. The families of the victims attempted to move forward, honoring their lost loved ones with memorials and gatherings. For some, justice had been served. For others, closure would remain elusive. Crawford continued his work, but he knew that the case of Nathaniel Ward would stay with him, a grim reminder of the dark side of humanity.